Greetings and welcome back to Room 303. We have been engaged in a series of conversations with Gibran and the Prophet. We are now at lecture 29, the final passage in the Prophet, the farewell. And I want to congratulate you for having stuck with us all the way through this. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net down that left-hand side with our playlist. And this now longest passage, actually, of all of the Prophet is in many ways a blessing. Now we're going to see it as a number of things. We're going to be reminded of Plato's Apology, where Socrates is called in front of the tribunal in Athens to defend himself. We've given for lectures at learnstrong.net about this. And he's now coming to the end of the day, the opening line, and now it was evening. The opening lines of this brilliant passage will as well make us think about Plato's Phaedo. There's Socrates ready to, drink his hemlock shake and to depart. Now, for background information, in some ways, it feels like in this reading, you guys can make up your mind, but it feels like both the Prophet, as in Al-Mustafa, as well as Gibran, don't want to leave. They don't want to finish this text, and yet, of course, as is the case in Plato's Phaedo, of course, the stories of Christ about to ascend, what are those final words to be spoken and to be shared? That's what makes this passage so powerful. Of course, we think about that final set of lines, farewell my fancy, in Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Gibran, in some ways as well, seems to be concerned about the reception of his collection of poems. And so we're going to get some observations here. In some ways, the attempt here is to tie all of the major themes together. We're going to see how that works out. One of the things we have to recognize is that for Gibran, everything is about community, togetherness, oneness, and so we're going to see a lot of that here. In some ways, the Prophet's gift is to receive their gift of receiving his gift, and we'll see this played out. And again, a defense in some ways of a life that has been lived in this way. We turn now to the farewell, and now it was evening. And Almitra, again, will finish the Prophet with her. She'll be given the final lines. And Almitra the seeress said, "Blessed be this day," of course the blessing here, "and this place and your spirit that has spoken." And he answered, "Was it I who spoke? Was I not also the listener?" All great teaching is this way, right? Both giving and receiving, both energy as well as ideas and the like. And he says, then, and the passage says, "Then he descended the steps of the temple." Think about that idea of descending, the opening lines of Plato's Republic. "I went down to the Piraeus." So here he goes. Of course, he's been in front of the temple, speaking there this entire time. This is this key symbol of the temple. And he descended the steps of the temple, and all the people followed him. And he reached his ship and stood upon the deck. So here we go. For those of you that love Pete Jackson's classic 3 films, obviously the extended versions, that Return of the King at the very end, when all of the focus is on sailing away. Here we are. And he's going to stand up on the deck, and he faced the people again. He raised his voice and he said, so here it is. And again, later it's going to be facing the sun. Here it's facing the people. "People of Orphalese, the wind bids me leave you. Less hasty am I than the wind, yet I must go." And you get this sense all the way through this. This is the longest poem. This is the longest set of words. This is the longest that he will talk. And you get the sense he doesn't really want to do it or go. "We, wanderers," notice it's we, all of us are wanderers. And you'll remember Tolkien's line, "All who wander are not lost," right? "We, wanderers, ever seeking," there's a key word idea, "seeking the lonelier way, began no day where we have ended another day. And no sunrise finds us where sunset left us." In other words, it's always about evolution, progress. "Even while the earth sleeps, we travel." Think about Tennyson's Ulysses, to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bounds of human thought. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net if you want to study that poem closer. "We are the seeds." Notice all the symbols. So just go through this passage noting all the symbols of the previous poems come to fruition here. It's quite remarkable. "We're the seeds of the tenacious plant, and it's in our ripeness and our fullness of heart that we are given to the wind and are scattered." I love to think about this word scattered and the popularity of this collection of poems. Few poems have had the run time of Gibran's Prophet, and I think will continue to do so. I think there's a reason for that. "Brief were my days among you." Now he's going to talk about living among them. And briefer still the words I've spoken. It is true that laconic nature of Gibran's poetry. But should my voice fade in your ears, that is to say, the only sin is to forget, and my love vanish in your memory, then I will come again. This messianic idea, right? The return. And of course, every time we read these lines, Gibran and of course Al-Mustafa comes back, right? That's the whole idea of great reading. And with a richer heart and lips more yielding to the Spirit will I speak. Yea, I shall return with the tide, and though death may hide me, and the greater silence enfold me, notice silence and secrets are a huge part of this poems, enfold me, yet again will I seek your understanding. And not in vain will I seek. Notice the repetition of the word seek. If aught I've said is truth, that truth shall reveal itself in a clearer voice and in words more kin to your thoughts. This is why we say the new is the new. The N-E-W is the K-N-E-W. Everything's cyclical. We are the stories we tell and retell. We're also, of course, the stories we decide to accept or reject. And then he'll say it. I go with the wind, people of Orphalese, but not down into emptiness. Notice the hopeful tone here. And if this day is not a fulfillment of your needs and my love, then let it be a promise till another day. And I think this is powerful. Reading the prophet when you're 20 is different from reading it when you're 50, and trust me, different from when you're reading it into your 60s and towards your 70s, okay? It is compelling. He says, men's needs change. Man's needs change, but not his love, nor his desire that his love should satisfy his needs. In other words, some things change, other things never do. The need, the longing for love is fundamental. Know therefore that from the greater silence I shall return. Again, that Odyssean kind of promise. The mist, we've heard about the mist, haven't we, in earlier poems, that drifts away at dawn, leaving but dew in the fields, shall rise and gather into a cloud, and then fall down in rain. The symbiotic, the power of nature, right? And not unlike the mist have I been. In the stillness of the night, still is a powerful word in these poems. I've walked in your streets and my spirits entered your houses. There's this tradition in Taoism that the wise Taoist old man lives up in the, up above the village. He never comes to the village very often, but it's his energy that will purview everything. It will somehow permeate all of what's going on in the village, and certainly Al-Mustafa will say this. My spirit has entered your houses, and your heartbeats were in my heart, and your breath was upon my face, and I knew you all. I knew your joy and your pain, and in your sleep your dreams were my dreams, and oftentimes I was among you, a lake among the mountains, which to me is what great teachers must be, the lake among the mountains, yes? I mirrored, we're familiar with his love of mirrors, I mirrored the summits in you, and the bending slopes, and even the passing flocks of your thoughts and your desires. In other words, what I've been saying is stuff you already knew. I was just reminding you of it. And to my silence came the laughter of your children in streams and the longing of your youths in rivers. Think about the power of that imagery that we've been playing with in all of this, the rivers and the streams. And when they reach my depth, the streams and the rivers cease not yet to sing. And again, we're back to music and back to singing. But sweeter still, notice his use of the word still, right? T.S. Eliot will say it that way, right? In East Coco, we must be still and still moving, right? But sweeter still than laughter and greater than longing came to me. It was the boundless in you, the God self earlier. The vast, notice his use of the word vast. The vast man in whom you are all but cells and sinews. He in whose chant all your singing is but a soundless throbbing. Again, notice everything is about community. This singing makes us think for sure a song of myself, no doubt. It is in the vast man that you are vast. Again, the community. And in beholding him that I beheld you and loved you. For what distances can love reach that are not in that vast sphere? It's a beautiful rhetorical question. What visions, what expectations, and what presumptions can outsoar that flight? We're all together. Even in our pain and our suffering, we're together. Like, and notice now the similes, like a giant oak tree covered with apple blossoms is the vast man in you. And of course, this is a familiar word picture for us now. Go back to, again, his passage on giving. His might binds you to the earth. His fragrance lifts you into space. And in his durability, you are deathless. There again is that passage that comes to mind. Of course, Song of Myself 6. And to die is different than what one's supposed and luckier, right? You have been told, now we're familiar with that phrase in that construction. You've been told that even like a chain, you're as weak as your weakest link. We're familiar with that idea. But, he says, this is but half the truth. You're also as strong as your strongest link. It's a brilliant, brilliant way to turn that old cliche on its head. To measure you by your smallest deed is to reckon the power of ocean by the frailty of its foam. To judge you by your failures is to cast blame upon the seasons for their inconstancy. I love this idea. In other words, guys, you cannot let your weaknesses and your failures define who you are. But they're certainly a part of who you are, and therefore don't run from them. You are like an ocean. Well, obvious word picture we're familiar with. All the similes of this passage are precious. And though heavy grounded ships await the tide upon your shores, yet even like an ocean, you cannot hasten your tides. Patience, right? Patience. And like the seasons, you are also. And though in your winter you deny your spring, think of Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, if winter come, can spring be far behind. And though in your winter you deny your spring, yet spring reposing within you smiles in her drowsiness and is not offended. Think not I say these things in order that you may say the one to the other, quote, he praised us well. He saw but the good in us, end quote. Now this is one of the arguments that's been laid against Gibran and the prophet. It's just a bunch of hopeful, silly idealism, a bunch of optimism that can't be backed up. In other words, it's possible they might say, hey, you only saw the good in us, and that's what you mirrored in your poems. He says, I only speak to you in words of that which you yourselves know in thought. And many have commented that when they read these poems, the thing that really does attract them is, man, I've heard this before. I know this. There's something that deeply I resonate with when I hear some of these ideas. And what is word knowledge but a shadow? Think about Plato's Republic 7, of wordless knowledge. In other words, the real stuff is the translinguistic stuff. Think of it this way. Teachers can only really share what they already, what students already know, right? That's that beautiful theory of learning of Plato, that all learning is recollecting, it's remembering in some way. Your thoughts and my words are waves from a sealed memory that keeps records of our yesterdays. Again, the poetry is magnificent here. Again, memory, the only sin is to forget. And of the ancient days when the earth knew not us nor herself, and of nights when earth was upwrought with confusion. There's joy, there's power in studying and reading the old stuff. Wise men, and of course all of this has been about wisdom, right? Wise men have come to you to give you of their wisdom. Now, this will sound very much like Plato's Apology. In other words, there have been other teachers, guys, that have come to you, and they've given to you of their wisdom. You notice him, he says, I came to take of your wisdom. In other words, I'm very interested in the symbiosis, and we think of Socrates, no question. To give is to receive, right? And behold, I have found that which is greater than wisdom. It is a flame spirit in you, ever gathering more of itself. Think about the power of flames and fire in this. While you, heedless of its expansion, and I think that heedless is important for why he has to give these words, bewail the withering of your days. It is life in quest of life in bodies that fear the grave. In other words, he says, I understand that the source of a lot of your questions had to do with your fears. I get it. There, he says it this way, are no graves here. In other words, there is no real death, right? If you're energy, you can't die, right? Because energy is that which can be neither created nor destroyed. These mountains and plains are a cradle and a stepping stone. All great learning is a stepping stone. Developmental, right? Whenever you pass by the field where you've laid your ancestors, a cemetery, look well thereupon, and you shall see yourselves and your children dancing hand in hand. Graveyards should not freak us out. Why? Because they're a reminder that there is no death. Verily, you often make merry without knowing. It's a brilliant insight, right? And in that regards, all of life is preparation for death, your death, and of course the death of those you love, no question. Right? And then he'll continue, comparing himself to other teachers. Others have come to you, to whom for golden promises made unto your faith, you've given but riches and power and glory. Less than a promise have I given, and yet more generous have you been to me. Now this idea that I never asked to be paid, that's going to be, of course, Socrates and Plato's Apology, no doubt. You have given me my deeper thirsting after life. In other words, I've been the teacher, but really I've been the student. Surely there is no greater gift to a man than that which turns all his aims into parching lips and all life into a fountain. And in this lies my honor and my reward, that whenever I come to the fountain to drink, I find the living water itself thirsty, and it drinks me while I drink it. Obviously a reference to John 7:37-39, that famous story. In other words, the symbiotic nature of true learning, right, is what he's commenting on. Some of you, now he's ready to speak to his critics. Some of you have deemed me proud and over shy to receive gifts, sounding very much like Socrates in Plato's Apology, right? A defense of his life. Too proud indeed am I to receive wages. Getting back to Socrates, I never accepted pay. But not gifts. He goes, oh, I got gifts from you because the symbiotic nature of learning. And though I have eaten berries among the hills when you would have had me sit at your board, and slept in the portico of the temple when you would gladly have sheltered me, yet was it not your loving mindfulness of my days and my nights that made food sweet to my mouth and girdled my sleep with visions? For this I bless you most. And that's what this is, right? It's a blessing, right? You give much and know not that you give at all. The best blessing, in other words, is the unknown blessing, right? It's the most pure, we might say. Verily, the kindness that gazes upon itself in a mirror, again, he loves his mirrors references, turns the stone, and a good deed that calls itself by tender names becomes the parent to a curse. Again, Gita 2, you have the right to work, but for the work's sake only. You have no right to the fruits of your labor. Desire for the fruits must never be your motive in working. You'll remember that passage finishes with, never give way to laziness either. In other words, the most powerful gift, he says, I could receive is the fact that you just accepted what I had to say in this day of talking, right? And some of you have called me aloof. Earlier it was proud, now it's aloof. And drunk with my own aloneness. You'll remember that a hermit asks him about the whole the whole notion of, pleasure and all of that. So here we go. Is Al-Mustafa a hermit, aloof, alone? And you said, quote, he holds counsel with the trees of the forest, but not with men. He sits alone on hilltops and looks down upon our city. Notice again this idea of looking down, right? And the elitism that maybe is being suggested here. He says it this way, true it is that I've climbed the hills and walked in remote places. How could I have seen you, say from a great height or a great distance? Remember that brilliant word picture earlier? If I'm on the mountain, I can't see the mountain. I got to be away from the mountain to see it. How can one be indeed near unless he be far? And again, Gibran reminds us why he's a genius poet, right? That is so true. Sometimes we're too close, and so we're not able to really have the connections that we need to have. It's brilliant. And teachers, of course, we're always got to kind of be careful of this, don't we? That we are not too close to students, because then we can't actually see them. And others among you, now we're to the third, and others among you called unto me, not in words, and they said, quote, stranger, stranger, lover of unreachable heights, why dwell you among the summits where eagles build their nests? Why seek you the unattainable? What storms would you trap in your net? And what vaporous birds do you haunt in the sky? Come and be one of us. Descend and appease your hunger with our bread and quench your thirst with our wine, end quote. Notice, by the way, the key question, why seek you the unattainable? Come down and be with us. By the way, notice the word descend, and of course he has descended the steps, and now he is on the ship deck, the deck of the ship, giving these final words. In other words, why couldn't you just be more like us? That's the question, right? Like, why? Why did you have to be so out there, right? In the woods or doing whatever? And he'll say it this way, in the solitude of their souls, they said these things. But were their solitude deeper, they would have known that I sought but the secret of your joy and your pain. The secret, of course, is the key word. And I hunted only your larger selves that walk the sky. You'll remember in our study of Tintern Abbey, he called it that idea of loftier thoughts, right? That idea that as you mature, you begin to think about different kinds of things. Elevated thoughts, he calls it, right? But the hunter was also the hunted. Notice the paradoxes here. For many of my arrows left my bow only to seek my own breast. you think about that Luke 4:23 passage, physician, heal thyself. The truest learning, here is his point, is always done, of course, by the teacher. We're back to the destroy the teacher passage of Song of Myself, passage 46 and 47. He most honors my style, who learns under it to destroy the teacher. And the flyer was also the creeper. For when my wings were spread in the sun, their shadow upon the earth was a turtle. And I, the believer, was also the doubter, the brilliant honesty of this. For often have I put my finger in my own wound, that I might have the greater belief in you and the greater knowledge of you. This is, of course, the doubting Thomas reference of John 20:24-27. And it's brilliant, right? In other words, he says, I'm both. I'm both the deliverer of information, but I'm also the doubter. There's a lot of things I'm not sure about. And he continues, it is with this belief and this knowledge that I say, you are not enclosed within your bodies, nor confined to houses or fields. Go back to what he has to say about houses, right? Shelters. That which is you dwells above the mountain and roves with the wind. It is not a thing that crawls into the sun for warmth or digs holes into darkness for safety, obviously referencing here the God Spirit, which leads obviously to freedom. He says, but a thing, this is what we are, a thing free, a spirit that envelops the earth and moves in the ether. You're as free as you allow yourself to be. That's his point, right? And if these be vague words, earlier they were hard words, you'll remember, then seek not to clear them. Embrace the ambiguity of these poems, he says. Vague and nebulous is the beginning of all things, but not their end. And I fain would have you remember me as a beginning. All teachers will say this, right? Life and all that lives is conceived in the mist and not in the crystal. And who knows, but a crystal is mist in decay. I love his, who knows, the perhaps idea. It's brilliant. This would I have you remember. Notice again, over and over again, it's, are you going to remember? In remembering me. That which seems most feeble and bewildered in you is the strongest and most determined. Is it not your breath that has erected and hardened